Hello friends, I am Ashwini and I like to welcome you all in this new video. In last video, we have seen the question bank. Friends, I have told you that I have found out nearly 150 questions on the topic 4.1 History of Novel. In first video, we have seen the questions on match the pairs and fill in the blanks. In this video, we are going to see the questions on find odd element out and true or false. Friends, the first example in this list, find odd element out, Francis Burney, Anne Radcliffe, Mary Shelley, James Joyce, Jane Austen. Now the odd element is James Joyce because others are women novelists. Now the second example, Emily Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, Salman Rushdie, Mary Ann Evans, Virginia Woolf. Now the odd element is Salman Rushdie because others are women novelists. Now the third example, Agatha Christie, John Bunyan, Harper Lee, Margaret Atwood, Toni Morrison. Now the odd element is John Bunyan because other are women novelists. Now the next example, Alice Walker, Apra Bain, Arundhati Roy, Kiran Desai, Kiran Nagarkar. Here also odd element is Kiran Nagarkar because others are women novelists. Now the next example, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya, R.K. Narayanan, Raja Rao, Salman Rushdie, Joseph Conrad. Here odd element is Joseph Conrad because others are Indian novelists. Now the next example, Apra Bain, Anita Desai, Nayantara Sehgal, Arundhati Roy, Kiran Desai. Here odd element is Apra Bain because though these all are novelists, others are Indian women novelists. Now the next example is Mulkraj Anand, Kiran Nagarkar, Kiran Desai, Arvind Adiga, Amitav Ghosh. Now the odd element is Kiran Desai because others are male novelists. Now the next example, Vikram Seth, Daniel Defoe, Upamanyu Chatterjee, Arun Joshi, Manohar Malgaonkar. Now the odd element is Daniel Defoe because others are Indian novelists. Friends, our next example is John Bunyan, Daniel Defoe, Jonathan Swift, Thomas Hardy, Salman Rushdie. Here odd element is Salman Rushdie because others are foreign novelists. Now the next example, E.M. Foster, James Joyce, John Bunyan, Joseph Conrad, Henry James. Odd element is John Bunyan because others are 20th century novelists. Now the next example, conflict, Gothic, picaresque, realistic, epistolary. Now in this list, odd element is conflict because others are the types of novel. Now the next example, theme, plot, character, setting, utopian. In this list, odd element is utopian because others are elements of novel. Next example, historical, allegorical, autobiographical, psychological, style. You can easily find out the odd element because the odd element is style and others are the types of novel. Now the next example, lifestyle, weather, time, language, period. Here odd element is language because others are aspects of setting. Friends, our next example is conflict, language, character, theme and place. Here odd element is place because others are elements of novel. Now the next example, Frankenstein, The Heart of Darkness, The Turn of the Screw, Billy Bird, Death in Venice. In this list, odd element is Frankenstein, which is a scientific novel, and others are famous novellas. Now the next example, Samuel Richardson, Henry Fielding, Lawrence Sterne, Tobias Smollett, James Joyce. Here, odd element is James Joyce because others are 18th century novelists. Friends, next example is Charles Dickens, Walter Scott, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Horace Walpole, Daniel Defoe. In this list, odd element is Daniel Defoe because others are considered as stalwart novelists. Now our next example is Anthony Burgess, William Golding, D.H. Lawrence, Jonathan Swift, Graham Greene. In this list, odd element is Jonathan Swift because others are 20th century novelists. Friends, our last example is Salman Rushdie, V.S. Naipaul, Kazuo Ishiguro, Samuel Richardson. In this list, odd element is Samuel Richardson because others are considered as immigrant authors. Friends, these all questions are about find out odd element out. Friends, now my next type of objective question is true or false. Let's see the examples of true and false. First example, the word novel is derived from Italian word novella, which means old. This is false statement. Next, earlier threads of the genre novel can be found in Virgil's Eclogues. Now, here the word can never be found, so it's a false statement. Third, Murasaki Shikibu's Tale of Genji has been described as the world's first novel. It's true statement. Don Quixote was written by Geoffrey Chaucer. Yes friends, it's a false statement. The German word Bildungsroman indicates growth. It's true statement. Now the next example, utopia is a real community or society possessing the ideal qualities. It's a false statement. Next example, stream of consciousness is a phrase coined by William James in his treatise Principles of Psychology, published in the year 1890. It's a true statement. A famous satire, Gulliver's Travels, was written by John Bunyan. It's a false statement. Samuel Richardson's two epistolary novels are Pamela, means virtue rewarded, and Clarissa. Yes, it's a true statement. Rajmohan Swaip was the famous novel of R.K. Narayan. It's a false statement. Next example, D.H. Lawrence was an immigrant author. Again, it's a false statement. Now, Charles Dickens and Walter Scott was stalwart novelist. This is true statement. Now, the next example, Pamela and Clarissa is considered as a picaresque novel. This is false statement. Now, the next example, E.M. Forster was a 18th century novelist. This is false statement. Agatha Christie is the pioneer of stream of consciousness technique in English novel. Again, it's a false statement because Virginia Woolf is the pioneer of stream of consciousness technique. Now the next example, setting is the background in which the story takes place. This is true statement. The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad is a famous novella. Again, it's a true statement. The novel of manners, Evelina, was written by Francis Burney. Yes friends, this is also true statement. In the 18th century, middle class could not get time for reading and discussing the novels. Again, this is the false statement because in 18th century, middle class people get time for reading and discussing the novels. Now the last example from this type of questions is detective fiction is a subgenre of crime fiction and mystery fiction. Yes friends, this is true statement. This is the list of objective type of question, true and false. Friends, we have seen odd element out and now we have seen the questions, objective questions on true or false. Now our next type of question, that is define the terms and complete the statement. We will look at the first term is novel. A novel is a relatively long narrative fiction which describe intimate human experiences normally in a prose form. Now the second term is novella. A novella is a type of prose fiction which is shorter than a full-length novel and longer than short stories. It is a well-structured yet short narrative, often satiric or realistic in tone. Now the next term is theme. Theme is the central idea in the novel which can be expressed in a nutshell. Now the next term is plot. Plot is essentially the story or the course of events that make up the theme. Now the next term, setting. Setting is the background in which the story takes place. Now the next term, conflict. The struggle between the opposite forces in the story is called conflict. Now the next term, style. The language and the techniques used by the author for the narration of the course of events is known as the style. Now the next term is realistic novel. The realistic novel is a fiction that gives the effect of realism. Now the next term, picaresque novel. The picaresque novel narrates the adventure of the protagonist who is an eccentric or disreputable person. Now the next term, historical novel. A historical novel is a novel set in a period earlier than that of writing. Now the next term, epistolary novel. The epistolary novel is that in which the writer presents the narrative through a series of correspondence or other documents. Now the next term is Gothic novel. The novel that include terror, mystery, horror, thriller, supernatural, doom, death or decay or haunted buildings are called as Gothic novel. Friends, our next term is autobiographical novel. The autobiographical novel is the novel based on the life of the author. Now the next term is allegorical novel. An allegorical novel is a story that bears more than one level of meaning. Now the next term is utopia. Utopia is an imaginary community or society possessing the ideal qualities. Now the next term is psychological novel. Psychological novel is the work of fiction that treats the internal life of the protagonist or even the other characters as much as the external factors. Now the next is stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness means the flow of thoughts. Now friends, the next term is Bildungus Roman novel. It indicates growth. This biography is connected with the growth of the protagonist's mind, spirit and characters from their childhood to adulthood. Now, our next term is detective fiction. Detective fiction is a fiction in which an investigator or a detective, either professional or amateur, investigates a crime, often a murder. Now, the next term is science fiction. Science fiction often explores the potential consequences of scientific and other innovations. Friends, these are all the terms which are very important for our detailed study. Now, friends, I like to share the last type of objective questions, that is complete the statements. Friends, these questions are also very important for our syllabus. Now, the last type of objective questions, that is complete the statements. Let's see the first statement. The 18th century has gifted English literature two entirely new forms. The remaining statement is one of them was periodical essay and the other was novel. Now the next statement is a novel is a creatively long narrative fiction which describes intimate human experiences, normally in a prose form. Now the third statement is the present English word novel is derived from the Italian word novella, which means new. Now the next example, a novel narrates a story embellishing it with more details of time, place, nature, people and their minds, their gestures and activities. Now the next example, Murasaki Shikibu's Tale of Genji has been described as the world's first novel. Now the next statement is the European novel begins with Don Quixote by Spanish writer Miguel de Cervantes, published in two parts between 1605 and 1615. Now the seventh statement is the 18th century new literature was characterized by the spirit of realism and denial of romantic features like enthusiasm, passion and imagination. Now the next statement is increase in trade and commerce along with the Industrial Revolution had given rise to the middle class. Now the next statement is novel was the prominent form of the 18th century and onwards to encompass the social, political and cultural happenings and scientific progress. Now, the next statement is the plenteous and colorful tradition of English novel was initiated by the Pilgrim's Progress of John Bunyan and Oronoku of Aphra Behn. Next, the plenteous and colorful tradition of English novel was followed by Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe and Moll Flanders and Jonathan Swift's Gullier's Travels. The pioneer of the stream of consciousness technique in English novel is by Virginia Woolf. Now, the next statement is Agatha Christie created her own place by writing many crime novels and introducing evergreen detective characters like Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple. Now the next statement is the first novel in English written by an Indian is Rajmohan's Wife by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya. Now the next statement is the novels which bore either nationalistic or social issues as their frame and they were written by the major trio of Mulkraj Anand, R.K. Narayan and Raja Rao. Now the next example is recent years have witnessed the dazzling performances by Indian novelists like Salman Rushdie, Arvind Adiga, Arundhati Roy, Kiran Desai and Kiran Nagarkar. Now the next example is the reader follow the actions of main character throughout the novel is protagonist. Next example, setting is the background in which the story takes place, and several aspects of setting are place, period, time, climate or weather and lifestyle. Friends, our next example is conflict means the struggle between the opposite forces in the story. Now the next example, style means the language and the technique used by the author for narration of the course of events. Now the next example, stream of consciousness is a phrase coined by William James in his treatise Principles of Psychology, published in the year 1890, which means the flow of thoughts. Now the next example, Bildungsroman is a German word which indicates growth. Next example, science fiction often explores the potential consequences of scientific and other innovations. Next example, the first novel based on science and technology is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, published in the year 1823. Friends, our last statement is detective fiction is a subgenre of crime fiction and mystery fiction. Friends, these are all about complete the statements. Friends, we have seen various types of objective questions like match the pairs, fill in the blanks, true or false, complete the statement, define the terms and find odd element out. Friends, I am very glad to share nearly 150 questions for your detailed study. Friends, this video I think very useful for you. Please share this video, like this video with your friends, subscribe my channel and wait for my new video. Friends, thanks for watching my video. Please like it, share it and subscribe it. Thanks friends.